Bob McElroy, Bank of America in Northern Virginia. Good morning, Bob.
Good morning.
And it is morning, too. We're talking at 7 in the morning. Both Bob and I get up around 5 in the morning. So, in fact, you'd be surprised, Bob, how many interviews I really do at 6 or 7 in the morning.
Yeah.
Because people, just want to get in, and they've already had 10 cups of coffee. Before we actually start, I don't know too much about you. I have little pieces. You have kind of a unique decision, a unique position in the sense that I've done over 70 interviews, and I think that I probably have, at the end of it, I always ask somebody if they have somebody who does significant volume that they would recommend, is pretty articulate. I don't think I've ever interviewed so many people that at the end of an interview, and I ask that question, they say, "Oh yeah, you ought to get hold of Bob McElroy." And so you have kind of a unique distinction there. I do know a little bit about you. I believe you were a jet pilot, right?
Right, Yeah, I'm a retired naval aviator
and
a retired airline pilot with a 747, and I did that.
Yeah, you have a very unique background. You fly combat over, you do any tours in Nam?
Right,
And what were you flying?
A4s, A7s.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So you're flying off decks, carrier decks, right? Yeah, I understand those night landings are really a lot of fun.
Yeah, the day ones are pretty normal, but the night ones are always unique.
Yeah, I had a friend of mine went to Georgetown that flew him off carriers, and he said those night landings. He said that's the one that would get you.
Right, the ones that separate the men from the boys.
Right, exactly. In fact, those were the exact words that he used. And then you say you flew 747s. Of course, that begs the question. I happen to have known this, but and also let me ask you, what kind of volumes have you done the last couple of years?
Oh, averaged 50 million or better.
Mm-hmm.
Been in the business 17 years, and I guess I've done 50 million at least, up to 90 million a couple of years over the last 16 years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Let me ask you something. How did you get those kind of volumes and doing the kind of stuff that you did? When did you actually physically start in the business?
Well, 83. And let me just give you a little more on my background. I got out of the Navy in 1969, went with TWA, got laid off in 70, jumped back into the Navy, then retired from the Navy in 83. I was at the Pentagon, had a master's degree in finance, and didn't know what I was going to do. So my wife was a real estate agent, and so I just sort of stumbled into the mortgage business. And then I got, when that was 83, then 84 I got recalled by TWA, and I opted to just fly reserve with them, got paid full time, and flew the 747 to Europe, and they gave me my old seniority number back to 1969. And then I stayed in the mortgage business full time because I was only gone maybe 3 weekends a month. And then I did that until I retired from them when I was 55 about 8 years ago.
Mm-hmm. And so you
mortgage business.
So you kind of transitioned. You had the luxury of transitioning in, really, because you were just flying 3 weekends a month.
Right.
Well, let me ask you something. When you started off, and by the way, let me ask you, where are you from, and how'd you end up in D.C.?
Well, just a farm kid from Missouri, and
Harry Truman country.
Right, exactly, and just graduated from the University of Missouri. Then I had to go into the military since the draft, and I opted for the Navy, and that's how I ended up as a naval aviator.
How'd you end up in D.C.?
Well, with the Navy.
I see. It was with
the Pentagon when I retired.
I see. And you live and work in Northern Virginia, if I remember correctly. Well, let me ask you. Let's kind of bring it kind of quickly up to the present. The business that you do, if we can, for the moment, leave aside referral business, where's most of your business coming from? Is it realtors or builders?
90% realtor referred.
90%.
I've been at the same telephone number for 16 years.
Mm-hmm.
Jim Nichols and I, he's my manager, we worked together for 16 years, and we were Alliance Mortgage Company. Then they went out of business, or we're going out of business, and then they told Jim, you can keep the office together, and they sold us to NCNB. Then NCNB bought Sovereign and CNS to form Nations Bank. Nations Bank bought Bank of America to become Bank of America.
Well, now you're the largest, but of course, as you know, with the recently announced merger a couple of days ago with J.P. Morgan, and I'm trying to think who the big boy was on the other side of it.
Chase.
Chase. My understanding is that combined, they're going to give you a run for the money for being the largest.
Well, I think they are. Citigroup, is the largest financial in the country.
Oh, sure, but that's a holding company.
Exactly. Then Chase / J.P. Morgan, and then Bank of America. But our retail operation is larger than anybody since we spread coast to coast. The only retail banking company that does that. Yeah,
right. Well, let me ask you. I guess one of the things I'd like to start off asking you is a question that actually I ask quite often. I'm trying to develop a pattern here. I think I have. But let me ask you, in the last 8 years that you've been in business and with the concentration in realtors, what do you think are some of the biggest changes that you've seen in that marketplace per se?
Well, probably the biggest thing is that, you used to deal with a bunch of realtors, and they could pretty much, send you the business, if you worked with them, and did a great job, had good products, etc. But people have gotten a lot more independent, the purchasers have, and more knowledgeable. So, I get some business from the bank branches. I get a lot of business from referrals from people that I've done business with over the past. And especially, number one, I still have the same telephone number for 16 years. Mm-hmm. Once in a while I get somebody that I did a loan for in Woodbridge. Then they moved to California. Just had one person come back 14 years later, and his real estate agent was going to shoot him with somebody else, and he said, I think I'll just see if Bob McElroy is still around. Mm-hmm. I really enjoyed doing business with him. So.
Well, I'm going to stratify this, and we will get into referrals a little bit later on. But right now, I'd like to just kind of stick with realtors. What about the confluence and the business arrangements now? We have the Long and Fosters with the Prosperity mortgages, the in-house loan officers.
Oh, there's no doubt that those large companies do try to push their agents to use their in-house mortgage company, but quite honestly, most of the in-house mortgage companies don't have the Bob McElroys or the Dave Oliverios, etc., around that are, your very good loan officers that will take great care of their people.
Yeah, and I interviewed Dave Oliverio, ironically, and he said the same thing. But let me ask you, I guess, since there's so many listeners out there that have 1 or 2 or 3 years experience that are listening to you, trying to absorb the way you did business, well, let me get right to the chase and ask you, what would you recommend loan officers in terms of getting realtor business in today's environment? What would you recommend that they do, people that have 1, 2, or 3 years experience that, don't have the experiential base that you do?
Well, I think the big thing is people always are asking me, Bob, how do you do so much business? And I think the biggest thing is, I work extremely hard, I'm well organized, and I'm very easy to get a hold of, 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. And you don't pass it on to somebody else and say, oh, we'll contact my processor to get a status. People contact Bob to get the status because I kind of have an ability to remember, like, even if I have 120 loans going, where they are.
But, I know how difficult that is. I also know you were a little bit modest when they asked you some of your volumes. Several people have told me that you've hit 100 million before, and in recent years too. And Steve Wallbeck and some others, not just in your office but others, really are kind of in awe of you because of the amount of business that you do. and it really raises an issue of how you can get out there and deal with realtors and give the kind of personal service that you're alluding to, and put it all together. I mean, there must be some way to be able to do this correctly.
Well, my motto has always been KISS, keep it simple, stupid. I see, many loan officers who probably are a lot smarter than I am, but they try to make this a very, burdensome, type business, and it isn't. And I think maybe that comes from my airline and naval aviator background, where you keep things very simple and sort of like checklist type things in your head as you're going along, and that I think has been one of my big successes.
Mm-hmm. I ran into a guy I did an interview with down south who I think it was in Birmingham, and he did maybe a bit of version with you. I mean, he carried it to the ultimate extreme, where he was doing huge. I think there were 200 loan officers in his company. He ranked either number 2 or 3, and he not only took every loan app and did it with realtors just like you did. He processed everything. And on top of it, had no database management system. He did everything in his head. He told me we'd get up at 4 in the morning, we'd go to bed at 12 at night.
Yeah, well, that's a little excessive.
Oh yeah, he did carry it to an extreme.
Yeah, but I've always done all my own loan applications until this last April. Then my son, who's been in the mortgage business, not with us, but other places, joined me, and now pretty much he does all my laptop computer work and takes most of the applications. Mm-hmm. And I'm just busy getting the business coming in the door.
Right.
And in the first month he was there, we did 82 loans for about, I think it was $14 million. So it's working well. Yeah.
Well, as I say, I've heard quite accurately that you're now doing stuff that's over $100 million, and those numbers would support it. At some point in time, don't you agree that if you want to jump from a 20 or 40 million level up into the levels that you're doing, at some point you need to have either a good structure, good personal work habits, a good data management system, or help. You need something in place to make it happen.
Right, exactly. Pretty much everything you said there, but it doesn't have to be a clumsy, burdensome system. You want to keep it extremely simple.
Well, you said you deal primarily with realtors. I guess one of the questions that would beg, when you were doing, if we can go back a little bit in time, 20 or 30 million a year, were you still calling on realtors at that point?
Oh yeah, my whole career I've been calling on realtors.
Well, that's kind of interesting. So you're still out there beating the pavement, or at least shaking hands and talking to people directly?
Oh yeah, I have. Couple of times a year I have luncheons over at Peking Gourmet, and have a bunch of my agents that I deal with over, and we have a good lunch together. And I have some parties in the summer at my swimming pool too. Mm-hmm. Over the years.
Peking Gourmet's where President Bush used to go.
Right.
That's one. It's one of the great Chinese restaurants.
Yeah.
In fact, when you walk in there, you can't see it, but they have a lot of that bulletproofed.
Right.
Yeah, but you can't see it. They always thought he'd get shot at from the road. So anyway, but that is one of the great Chinese restaurants. Anyone who gets into the Washington area, it's in Falls Church, and it's very well known, and it truly does stand out. Well, let me ask you: do you, on a weekly basis, go out and talk to realtors?
Yeah, really on a daily basis. I'm on the phone with them. I don't see them that often because over the years, some agents that really didn't do much business and didn't do much business with me, where I'd be talking to them, and they said, "Oh, Bob, I haven't seen you in our office for a while." I said, "Well, I'm just really too busy to, doing loans that I don't have time to come in and have coffee with everybody." Mm-hmm. And sort of telling them that the people that are sitting around your office probably aren't the people that are out there doing business. And, people generally like to be dealing with people that are successful. I like to be dealing with successful real estate agents. Most of them like to be dealing with loan officers that are successful also.
Do you kind of deal in what's there's a theory out there in our business, what's called centers of influence, where you really try and concentrate on those realtors that are successful, and try to, as much as possible, avoid putting enormous times into realtors that either sending you lousy deals or occasional deals, and in general wasting your time.
Oh yes, definitely. I've found over the years that I always try to be nice to people that want to do business with me, even that maybe I didn't. If they continually bring me business that I don't think is doable, that wastes their time and wastes my time. I try to take a look at it right up front and find out, is it doable or not. And definitely you want to deal with people that are doing business that is doable, and that's about that.
Mm-hmm. Well, you're right when you say that's about it. It makes sense to deal with realtors who are successful. Not only are you going to get a better quality referral, they're not going to be as price sensitive with that strong recommendation to you.
Right, exactly.
Let me ask you something. It's not a question I often ask. You might be surprised. In the interviews, when I started off, I did quite a bit. But how do you feel in general about pricing? It's kind of a loaded question.
Well, it's important, but it's not the deal killer usually. You just have to be competitive. Like I tell a lot of people, we do more loans, Bank of America does, than any other company in the Washington area. So that must tell you that we're pretty competitive and have a pretty good sales force, products, etc. But on any given day, we're probably not going to beat everybody else. That's for sure. 365 days a year. Some companies will come out with loss leaders to try to get business in the door, and then 2 or 3 months later they're back higher than everybody else. But pricing is important. You have to be competitive, but you're not always going to be the lowest.
Mm-hmm. Do you believe in the theory of selling programs, not price?
Oh, definitely, and selling yourself also. The service that with Bank of America, we're coast to coast. I can get you approved here. I'm doing $1 million loan in Boston right now for a person that was here, and I did his loan, and he liked doing business with us. I'm doing his loan out there, and I've done numerous ones all over the country, California, etc. And when they do a mortgage with us, they do get a lot of free banking services, so people like that. They like numerous other things of dealing with Bank of America.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think you can extrapolate a little bit from that. Most of the producers that I've talked to that do in excess of $50 million a year, which you do, a lot of them are now starting to concentrate is not the correct word. Let's put it this way: they're putting great emphasis on doing loans outside of their market area now. And you're with a large bank, maybe it's a little bit easier, but I'm finding that most people in that group, instead of the old days, you were around the old days, at least a little bit, they would just simply give up the lead to somebody else and maybe get a little slice of bacon in return for doing it. But now they're doing the full loans themselves.
Right, exactly.
And, which brings...
some companies you can do them lots of different places throughout the country, and some you can't, so...
Right. I'd like to talk about an area that you alluded to and you've inferred, but we haven't talked about directly. And, keep in mind that people who are listening to you, a lot of them don't have the experience that you do, and that's that concept of giving personal service. It's one thing to say, when I give real good personal service. It's another quite a thing to articulate it and be specific about it. So I'd like to ask you specifically what you do to give personal service to your realtors, and just how important you feel that is in the whole process.
Well, number one, I'm not very articulate, and I try to, give the best service possible to my clients and my realtors, and that's why a lot of the realtors come back to me, because they know when Bob McElroy says the loan is going to be approved, it will be approved and settle on time with no glitches. And the easiest thing on that, is to let's see, I lost my train of thought here.
Well, the easy in terms of giving good service, the easiest.
I just try to do the very best job with every deal that comes in the door. That's.
Mm-hmm. Do you take every loan application, for example? Now, I know you told me recently your son is now taking some of the loan apps, but in general, because the audience out there, they don't do the volumes you do, let me rephrase that and say, would you recommend that they take every loan app in person?
Oh, yeah, definitely recommend that. And I did up until last April, and then my son joined me, who has 10 years more experience in the mortgage business, and now he does a lot of the applications. But I meet and talk to the people before he sits down with them, and then they either call during the process. If they have questions, they call him or call me, either one. And the agents pretty much are totally hooked up with me, but they talk to Rob, my son, also, because he's very experienced in the business too.
So have you brought him in the sense of like being a partner, so that if you're not available, your realtors have been trained to feel comfortable to call him?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, most of them know him. He was in the A side about 10 years ago for about 2 years. Then he went over to the BCD side and has been there, and then came back over with me last April, and now my daughter's in the BCD side where he was.
Hey, paybacks to parents are hell.
Right, exactly.
I think that's kind of neat. Let me jump into an area that's equally important in this business, and that is maintaining contacts with your previous clients. Do you use a database first off?
Yes, I do.
And what do you use?
Well, it's just our own self-generated in-house database that I keep a list of all my previous clients and try to, not as often as I'd like, send a little note to them every maybe year or two, and I get a lot of repeat business from doing that.
Do you think if you did it more, you'd get more business? If you had is this a sophisticated database or one that's relatively simple?
No, it's very simple. I'm sure that I would get more business if I basically had the time to, do it. That's the big thing right there.
Yeah, it's kind of an interesting comment. A little bit of a plug. We have a product called Sales Talk that's different from Mortgage Talk in that it has non-industry, nationally known speakers who talk about selling. But within that, we also have a couple of technocrats, and one of them is a woman who I was referred to, and her name's Jacqueline Zimmerman, and she is considered to be one of the top 100 experts in ACT, and most of the large players use ACT, and we did, it was kind of interesting, did a beginning, an intermediate, and an advanced interview on ACT as it relates to loan officers and what they can do, and she's also a consultant to a hired gun. And it's really interesting when you have a good database, what you can do with it. There are people out there, Bob, that do the kind of volumes you do, and using ACT and assistants to help them do it, so they don't have to do all the work themselves. I mean, they're cranking out stuff that is truly amazing, from weekly newsletters to remembering birthdays and everything. And it's I would say at that level, they're bringing in anywhere between 25 and 35%, and as high as 60% in one case out in California, in referral business.
Yeah, I've known people that they pretty much just operated with referrals, and Dick Koch, who's our manager over in Bethesda, in fact, I think that pretty much is how he's done business for a number of years.
Well, you know what it is. It's for those realtors. I'm sorry, for those loan officers out there that are listening to this, especially those of you that are in the 15 and 20 million category. Maybe have a couple years under your belt and want to get to the next level. One of the easiest ways to do it is to create a good database, to keep it up to date, and to work your referral business. I think you'd have to agree, Bob, that there's nothing like an annuity income, and you can think of running a good database and getting referrals as an annuity income.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, but plus they're not as price sensitive. Well, let me ask you something. When you're dealing with your referral clients, the people who become your referrals, you mentioned something that your son may take the loan app, but you also are developing the relationship with them, and that is that primarily over the phone, or do you meet them there too for a little quality time? How do you do that?
Well, usually, I'd say probably 75% of them I talk to over the telephone after their agents have referred them to me, and then I set them up to meet with us. And I'd say 99% of the people I always meet with. Now, some loan officers in today's market just do everything by fax and overnight and never meet with them. I think that's a definite disadvantage. I think that one meeting with them to go over the good faith estimate, closing costs, what their monthly payment's going to be, and to have that very accurate, that's the most important thing in the whole loan process.
Mm-hmm.
And I do, then when they come in to meet with us, then I talk to them for just maybe 2 or 3 minutes, then introduce them to Rob, and he does the loan application, and then that's it. So
your key, okay, so now I understand. You had mentioned that before. So you are keeping that face-to-face identity and spending some quality time with them, so there is that connection that's made.
Exactly.
I see.
Yeah. Steve Allbeck, who's in the same office, totally agrees with that. He started to do, doing fax and sending packages out, but found that you just didn't get the bond with the customer when you do it that way. So he's back to meeting everybody himself also. Yeah.
Ironically, I get kind of a division with high-end producers. There's quite a few that do use the fax and spend time on the telephone, feel very strongly about it, and the numbers would not necessarily contradict them, and they virtually have no physical contact with them. I'm kind of like you. I was from the old school. I was a great believer in taking the loan app in person and, having as much personal contact and quality time, as you could with them. Let me ask you something a little bit on the as a kind of a technocrat. What do you have in place for internal systems to make sure that the loans are processed quickly? And before I do that, I just want to ask you kind of a throwaway question in today's hot real estate market. Are you doing pre-approvals, a lot of pre-approvals, or pre-qualifications, or how are you handling that?
Pretty much everybody, all the agents that I deal with, want to get their people in, get them pre-approved prior to writing a contract, because with the market being as hot as it is back here in the Northern Virginia area, if you're not you have to be at least pre-qualified, if not pre-approved, to get the property, since usually there's going to be, if it's a good property, there are going to be 4 or 5 contracts on it, and the person that isn't pre-approved isn't most likely going to get it.
Mm-hmm. Does that mean you're taking a full, 1003, the whole shebang, and
full
alternative documentation? Mm-hmm. And then what do you do since you're not using DU? Do you have some sort of courier system to get, or do you do it in-house, the pre-approvals?
Well, we just do it in-house, and we're centralized processing and out of Charlotte, North Carolina, which we've been since 1989, and it's a wonderful system, and it's very user-friendly, and we have a great staff of people in our processing department and settlement department, and if you talk to almost any settlement attorney around the Washington area and Northern Virginia especially, well, I'm sure it's the same thing in the because Greg Bush, you probably heard of him.
Yeah, I was with Greg at the inception of our businesses. We go way, way back. He does about $120 million a year.
Yeah, he's a great loan officer.
Mm-hmm.
And if you talk to pretty much any settlement attorney company, the MBHs, the Key Titles, they'll say if we had a preference, we'd like to do business with Bank of America because they're so user-friendly as far as getting the packages to us. And today, I think we're one of the very few who emails the packages to the title companies. So in other words, I can get a loan approved at 9 o'clock in the morning and have it emailed to them at 9:15.
That's fabulous. Yeah, you're right. By the way, you are one of the very few that does it that way.
Right.
But that's where the business, from a technical standpoint, is heading. I know. I don't know if you use personal email. I do, and I can't live without it.
Yeah, I really don't. I've used.
There's not as much need.
For 35 years, but I just never have gotten into the personal computer really, and I've got better things to do, I guess.
Yeah.
But my son, he, the company has email on our personal computers, and he does all that for me.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any processors over in your Annandale branch, or is everything truly centralized?
Yeah, everything is truly centralized in Charlotte, North Carolina.
Mm-hmm. So
we have about 3 assistants for 12 loan officers, and they do the copying, etc. in the office.
Mm-hmm. What do they just scan and fax the stuff down?
Right.
So you can get the equivalent of a DU approval, I would assume, within a couple hours, as long as you have the basic stuff.
Oh, right. I took a loan this Tuesday morning. It settled yesterday with a full appraisal.
Oh, with a full appraisal,
right.
Too. Of course, that begs the question how you can get appraisers are so busy in that kind of time period.
Well, they're appraisers that have been using for 17 years.
Sure. Well, that's the other thing, too.
When I need something fast, they're, I do a lot of business with them. They're willing to get it to me and email it to our processing center. Once again, that's how they get the appraisals there. Yeah.
Do you think it's important to have a good relationship with appraisers for loan officers?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, that can make or break your business.
Do you know that's an area that's never been discussed? I'd like to talk about it just a little bit. In 70 interviews, we've never touched on it.
Yeah, I basically, for about 14 years, used the same appraiser, just one appraiser, and then he had to get out of the business due to health reasons. But I'd been using about 3 or 4 others, but other people in our office, since I've been in the same office for 16 years, I had been using, and now I use basically 3, split the business with them, and have an excellent working condition or relationship with all 3 of them.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, it's one of the most important things, especially in a real estate market where we are right now, with the prices going up. Appraisers have to really know what they're doing, because I talked to numerous real estate agents that have had deals broken by appraisers that were not able to get the value that they needed on the property, which the value was there.
Yeah. You know what's so interesting? And this part we have talked, when you talk about competing with the internet companies out there, haven't talked about it in a long time, but there is an important aspect to that that you indirectly have brought up, and that is with a lot of the internet companies that scare some loan officers and really shouldn't. There's ways to handle that pretty good. But with some of the internet companies, when there's an appraisal, if you have an appraiser that's located in Chicago or New Orleans or whatever, and the appraisal comes in a couple grand low, and the people are doing a 95 or a 90, and they're really strapped on cash, it really pays to have a local appraiser that you can go to.
Oh, it definitely does, yeah. And that's when some people call me just shopping around, and that's one of the things I mentioned. Is your appraisal going to be done with somebody locally who really knows the market? What about, are there any hidden fees with people that operate in the internet? There are numerous ways to sell around the internet. I think the internet right now is a good place for people to just look and sort of see what's available out there. Then go do your loan.
Right. Well, you raised every issue that got raised in other discussions, and that's the fact that people are using it pretty much for an informational database, pretty much like they're looking to buy cars. They still want to kick that tire and bang that door ultimately. But the Internet companies also, the way they're doing business, they look very attractive on their rates. But I think without exception, the realtors that I interviewed that have active competition, even if it's just 15-20% of their deals, all of them are kind of killing the Internet companies by doing a good faith, getting it to the people, and basically say, now you go back and look at some of their charges and see how equivalent we are. And almost without exception, Internet companies are throwing in junk fees and charges that when you add the whole thing up, they're just not competitive.
Right.
You know, Scott Cooley of Contour Software has pointed out in a couple real estate and mortgage articles that you may get that loan in, but then you lose the efficiencies after it's in because you still got to process it the same old way.
Right, exactly.
So anyway, I don't think the Internet companies they're going to take some volume. There's no question about it. They're already doing it, but I think at some point they're going to max out. I think that it will creep up a bit, but you know, people still like to see people like you face to face and talk to a real live person over the phone.
Right, exactly. And Bank of America, we do have, you know, we do a certain amount of business over the Internet, telemortgage, etc. So, you know, it is a part of every major mortgage company's business out there.
Yeah, right, exactly. I think I'd like to kind of just wrap up in one area that we talked about just briefly, and you've alluded to it in so many different ways, and that is the importance of maintaining relationships with your clients and with your realtors, because this is a relationship business.
Right, exactly.
And I just wondered if you kind of finish up on that subject. It's a subject that gets talked about quite a bit, but I think for remembering once again our audience out there, there's a lot of people out there I don't think really truly understand that importance.
Oh yes, I think, like you said, the most important part of the business is repeat business. I mean, you can do a great loan, but if you don't follow up and you know, talk to your real estate agents, other clients after the fact, you know, you need more business to continue on. And I think one of the biggest things in my success has been availability, and I try to treat people like, you know, they like to be treated, and always have a minute for people, and you know, keep them involved in how loans are coming along. I don't talk to agents many times over the process because they're busy. They don't really want to just call and talk. They want to find out, you know, how's that loan doing, Bob?
Mm-hmm.
But with dealing with a lot of the agents that I've dealt with for years, you know, they don't call me weekly and or want a weekly status report. I've found in the business that really that takes too much of your time. If they know and know and can trust you, they don't have to call you weekly and say, "How's that loan gone, Bob?"
Yeah, isn't it interesting how kind of at the end of the day, the kind of what I would call in quotes the human condition kind of takes over, and it gets into levels of trust and experience and caring about people over a long time.
Well, I think that's another thing. You know, me being older, currently 63. And
you're one of the old boys. I'm not far behind you, but
I didn't get into the business until later.
Yeah.
And a lot of the agents that I dealt with at that time in the Washington area here are either retired military people or military wives, so they felt very, you know, at ease dealing with me. And, you know, after doing a few transactions with me, felt that, hey, this is somebody I want to do business with.
Mm-hmm. Do you know all the people that I talked to, and trust me when I tell you there were a lot of people that recommended you. All of them used kind of the same words, highly ethical, hard-charging, very empathetic, and above all, they all said, I'll have you, a very hard worker, puts his nose to the ground and just does it. And I think there's a lesson for loan officers out there. It doesn't always have to be flash and dash and run around the XKE convertibles and everything. There is something to be said for just hard work. And there was a loan officer from SunTrust, I think it was Ed Navarro, it's been a while back. He just said that there really is just no substitute for hard work and getting out there and putting your nose to the grindstone.
Yep, that's exactly true. I remember here just a couple of days ago, Rob, my son, was taking a loan application, and we do a very thorough application, set the expectations, tell people exactly what they're going to need right up front. And this girl had been a processor for another loan officer who I knew in the area, and she said, "You're going to get on lists?" I said, he just used to write about two pieces of information on a sheet and throw it to me and said, "Here, go after it." So
that speaks volumes.
It doesn't get you repeat business, like you said, hard work. That's probably my biggest thing. And a lot of people say, "Well, Bob, I don't want to work that hard." But quite honestly, I don't work any harder than a lot of people that I see that do $12 to $15 to $20 million a year. I just work smarter, to be quite honest with you.
Mm-hmm. And you do it. Would you say you closed or did 80-something units last month?
Well, that was, let's see, May, I think it was, 82.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's getting up there. I've interviewed people that have gotten up there pretty close to that. But when you're doing that, you better have some sort of system and better have your act in place if you're going to do that.
But once again, it all goes back to keep it simple, stupid.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you get too complicated, if you want your processors to give you rundowns on all loans throughout, you're not going to be able to do it with that type of volume. Yeah,
you just kind of strangle yourself. Well, I think it also goes back, and I think we're going to end on this, Mark, the fact that if people have an inherent trust that's been built up over the years, they don't require the kind of contact that's necessary. They know, first off, they know if there's going to be a problem, you're going to give them a call right away.
Exactly.
And if there's not a problem, then, enjoy your commission when it comes.
Right.
Well, look, I've enjoyed talking with you, Bob. I think the points you made are very salient, and they make a lot of sense, and they're very, very basic. I was told going in, talking to you, that this would be a very basic conversation about basic ways to do business. There'd be nothing fancy or loop-de-loop, and it certainly is proved true. And so I want to thank you for talking to us, Bob, and we'll keep in touch.
All right.
Thanks, Bob.